Hi, folks. How's everyone doing? Thank you all for joining us today. We're just going to give it another minute or two as people are getting in from the waiting room. So we'll get started in just a minute. Thanks. All right, I think we're going to get started for the sake of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us for the Equipment Rental Roundtable discussion. My name is Amanda Littleton, and I work with the Cheshire County Conservation District. And we're really excited to be sharing this with you, this roundtable discussion with you all today. We're also working with our partners at the Rockingham County Conservation District. We have Vicki Nelson with us, with the White River Natural Resources Conservation District in Vermont with Jennifer Byrne. And myself, and I'll just share that we're really thankful to have funding to be able to do this through Northeast SARE, which is the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, which is an arm of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Our intention of this workshop today is for us to discuss with other service providers, other conservation districts, folks who are interested in potentially starting a rental program of their own, or perhaps you already have a rental program and you just want to be able to sort of troubleshoot and talk through challenges of what's happening with that rental program. And so our intention today is really to sort of have an open dialogue and talk about sort of 3 examples of rental programs in northern New England. We have about an hour and a half allotted for this conversation, and we really hope that there's going to be lots of questions from you guys so we can dig into the areas where you're interested in covering. Just a little overview of the agenda for the day. We're going to provide a brief overview of our programs, a little summary, and then we're going to dig into these 7 topics. The goals of the rental program, selecting equipment, maintenance and storage of equipment, insurance requirements and rental fees, managing a calendar and juggling weather disruptions, funding to purchase equipment, and outreach and education for farmers. So those are the topics that we're going to be covering. But really encourage, if you don't see the topic you were hoping to dig into on there, really encourage you to add your questions to the chat. Benet Hershon with the Conservation District for Cheshire County is going to be sort of monitoring the chat and helping to make sure that everybody's questions are brought forth. So to get started in the chat, I would love it if all the participants, if you wouldn't just take a moment to introduce yourself, if you wanted to share your name and location, any affiliations you have, and what interests or questions that you're bringing to the table today. So if you have a rental program or if you're interested in getting a rental program started in your region. So that would be great. So I'll just mention that one more time to add to the chat. We'd love to be able to see sort of who you are, your name, your location, any affiliations with which conservation district or other service providers you work for, and your interests and questions as it regards to getting equipment rental programs started or maintaining them if you already happen to have one started. And this list of these 7 topics, please just give that some thought. We're going to go through and we'll list off as we're sort of moving from topic to topic. So we encourage you to ask questions as we're digging into each of these topics. All right, so I think that covers it for our introduction. I'm going to stop the screen share. That way we can all just focus on the speakers. And I'm going to hand it over to our panelists, Vicki and Jennifer, to start us off with an overview of the programs that they run. And so just sort of the summary for these rental programs, just wanting to better understand, types of equipment, how long you've been at it, and then hopefully you could share a piece of advice and a challenge with running an equipment rental program with the group, just to get things started. Vicki, could I hand it over to you first?
Sure. I was just thinking I didn't know which one of us would go first. My name is Vicki Nelson. I work at the Rockingham County Conservation District. It's in southern New Hampshire. And we partner with the Strafford County Conservation District for our rental program. So really 2 counties working together. Mostly it's sort of watershed based. So we've sort of have a common goal of water quality and soil health between the 2 counties. So it led to sharing the equipment rental program. The program started in 2012 with an ash spreader. And most of our equipment has been grant funded, and we've sort of just built it over time as new ideas for equipment have come up. We've written a grant and gotten started. So our equipment is rental fee based. So we have a rental fee just to try to cover maintenance, not really to cover time for coordinating it or anything. So we have several pieces of equipment, a no-till drill, soil aerator, ash spreader, some BCS equipment with attachments, a roller crimper, corn planter. We've had a fence post pounder, which we don't have to rent anymore. So that's a quick overview. I would say I was having trouble deciding what the biggest challenge was, but maybe one of the least common, a challenge that maybe is not as well known that I feel like we've had is with insurance, because we have a lot of small farmers that are kind of hobby farms and they want to use the equipment. They have 5 acres or 10 acres, but they're not true farms, and they haven't had the insurance requirements that our insurance requires. So that's been a challenge, us trying to figure out a way to help those small farmers. And then a piece of advice I have for other programs would be to make sure that you have someone, a board member or an interested farmer that really understands equipment and is excited about the program. I personally, I've never worked on a farm or with equipment, hands-on myself. So understanding some of the maintenance things that come up can be a challenge. So having some people in your corner, board members or other people that really understand equipment is really helpful. Thank you. Look forward to talking with everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Byrne. I'm the district manager of the White River NRCD. We cover Orange and part of Windsor County, Vermont. We collaborate with the Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance on our equipment rental library. And let's see, our piece of this started in 2018. It was actually, before I was district manager, we bought a no-till drill. And the Farmers Alliance also purchased a no-till drill around that same time, and we're renting it out. And we came together maybe a year and a half or 2 years later. We had already been working with the Farmers Alliance, but we decided to really, pool our resources together, make it one program, so that just reducing the burdens and the confusion. And what they had been doing really well is the maintenance and transportation of the drill, which is certainly, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And it's worked really well since we've started working together more formally. So now all of our drills, we have 3 no-till drills. One of them is an Etchison drill, which is smaller, good for slopier fields and good for interseeding hay fields. So that was something that was requested us to look by some of our grass farmers to look into this. And so we wound up purchasing that drill 2 years ago through the Farmers Alliance. And so all 3 of the drills are housed at a board member for the Farmers Alliance at his farm, and he really maintains them. He transports them. So having someone who's designated to do that work is really important. I think basically the same structure where we have rental fees, and that does go to pay for the maintenance. But his time is really compensated outside of that. It's the Farmers Alliance dues, I would say, pay for his time more than anything else. And we have a few other items in our library, and I'll put a flyer. I do have a flyer, so I'll put it in the chat, and you can see. But we have a set of portable scales that we use for manure spreader calibration, and also weighing hay yields. We have a moisture probe, so in combination with those 2 tools, we can get estimates of yields. We purchased, that's a district-owned piece of equipment that we purchased like 5 years ago, I would say, in order to help farmers with their compliance with the required agricultural practices over here in Vermont. One of them is a nutrient management plan standard for farms of a certain size. So just trying to help these smaller farmers know how much manure they're spreading and also how much yield they're getting off their fields. So that's free. That service is free. We don't charge for the scale use. We think of it as a great investment in relationships. When people call us and we come out and provide a service, we're happy to do so as a district. And the other piece of equipment we have available right now is a roller crimper, and that's in collaboration with Cedar Circle Farm. And maybe later in this discussion, we can talk about kind of the expanding and the future of our library and what we're thinking in terms of other pieces of equipment. But right now, that's what we've got. And I mentioned the challenge, and it's also the advice at the same time. It is really important, I think, to have a designated maintenance person for your drills. And also the transport is a big issue because, I mentioned at first, our district drill was not being maintained, and it was being transported by the farmers themselves. And it really just created a problem, one, in knowing where the drill was. I had to hunt it down several times. And 2, without having someone set eyes on it in between each farm, there's just a lot of calibration and tweaks that can happen and stuff that needs to be repaired and banged back into place. So I would say having that the eyes on the drill after every use has been really important.
Thanks, Jennifer and Vicki. I'll just share, I'm also going to sort of serve as a panelist, but trying to be the MC as well here, so bear with me. So I'll share about our program. We started to get equipment in 2012, and we were starting with some no-till drills. Our equipment program has grown. We now have about 10 implements with a value of around $180,000 of purchase price value. And they have ranged, from many of the same pieces that both Vicki and Jennifer have mentioned, with spreaders and airways, roller crimpers, corn transplanters, BCS for small scale producers. And our newest piece of equipment is our soil steamer, which is meant for use in greenhouse weed management. All of our equipment has to do with soil health management, and that's sort of our goals of getting it started. I would think that our biggest challenge has definitely been aging equipment, now that some of our equipment we've had for over a decade. So managing maintenance and juggling that with farmer needs and the calendar, and just sort of making sure that we can kind of keep that equipment in good working order and on the road and available to people when they want it most. Because many folks, there's certain windows of opportunity when everybody wants the same equipment. So that's probably been our biggest challenge. And I think my biggest piece of advice would be kind of piggybacking on what Vicki had said about having a farmer or multiple farmers who are sort of in your corner. We've started years ago when we got this started, we started an equipment committee to help us manage the equipment, and that are made up of farmers and other knowledgeable service providers. And that has been vital for us to be able to continue this program and grow it and be successful. They really provide great advice on sort of what types of new equipment are we getting? How do we shift costs based on what we're seeing for maintenance needs? And how do we ensure that the right maintenance is happening year over year? So that equipment committee has been really helpful. They've also been very helpful when looking at sort of the education and outreach. How can we be doing sort of trainings and education on this equipment throughout the year to make sure folks have the know-how to be able to use it well? So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate everybody putting their contacts in the chat. It's great to know who's with us today. Just want to encourage you to also please put your questions and topic areas of interest that you want to make sure that we cover, so we dig into it. To get us started, our first topic that we're going to be talking about today is goals of the rental program. I can get us started, and then I'll pass it over to Vicki and Jennifer. For our goals of the rental program, we really saw it as this is a way that we could help work on our mission and our soil health goals, as well as our water quality goals for the county district. All of our equipment is sort of put through that filter when we're looking at what we're going to get next. Like, is it going to help farmers meet soil health management goals? Is it going to help protect water quality for the region? And that's what we sort of just helps us decide if it's a good fit for our rental program. Farmers have asked for a lot of other production type equipment, but we've been trying to keep it really fitting in with our mission. And we saw it also as a great way to sort of build on what was available in the region. Cooperative Extension does an awesome job for education. NRCS has great financial and technical assistance for producers through Farm Bill. We thought, equipment rentals was really a niche that we could fill with our partners to help meet our farmers' needs. So I'll pass it over to you guys for other comments on goals of your program.
I feel very similarly to Amanda that we had water quality and soil health in mind when we pick out this equipment, and that we also get asked about other types of things that we don't necessarily feel are a good fit. So I actually don't have much to add to Amanda. So water quality and soil health and a need that farmers had, which is the small equipment that they might not need to buy, right? They don't need to own it. They can use it once a year or once every 3 years. And then so we can have it so that way they don't have to buy it themselves. So.
And this
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I thought the invitation was to also put some things in there. I was going to say I'm from Belknap County, which is in New Hampshire, and for us, affordability to the farmer was a big consideration as well in our rental program.
We're along the same lines as far as goals relating to conservation. And I think a goal of the program is to show farmers, allow farmers to use something before they invest in that equipment themselves. So we see that as a success when somebody goes off and buys their own piece of equipment that, used to use ours. And that's definitely another goal, prove that it's worthwhile and help them transition.
That's a great point. All right, so our next topic is selecting equipment. So how do you choose your equipment inventory?
So this is a little bit of related to having some farmers and board members that are invested in the program, but I feel like a lot of our direction for equipment has come from our board members and the farmers that are out there working with other farms and understand the needs on their own farm, but they're connected with the other farmers. So I feel like a lot of our suggestions for equipment have come from board members.
And this is something that I feel like we could have a more like a planned out approach. We could probably do a better job of that, thinking about, looking towards the future. But to date, it's been, hearing from farmers in the community about what they need, us kind of knowing what is needed in terms of these scales for manure calibration. It's like almost entirely, regulatory based. That's why we went out and got the scales, because we needed that number in order to approve their nutrient management plan. But then the way that we're planning to expand is also kind of based on what equipment is already available in the watershed. We have been approached, by Cedar Circle Farm. They have a lot of equipment for vegetable farms that it's actually electric equipment, planters and things like that, that they've been really willing to have used in the watershed and add to the rental library. So that's another factor, is kind of doing an assessment of what equipment is out there already that we can connect other farmers to.
Great, I completely agree with what Vicki and Jennifer have shared. I'll just also add, like, when we're selecting equipment, we think a lot about the scale of the farmers that we're serving, like what size they are, what type of tractors are they utilizing, sort of when we're looking at what we're selecting for implements, for horsepower requirements, are we going to be getting something outsized for most folks in their tractors. And so we've tried to look at sort of certain scales that we're getting, like, certain things are addressed for small farms, others for medium and large. Like thinking about our seed drills, we started with a 7-foot drill, and we quickly heard, although it was popular with many medium-sized farmers, we quickly heard from our dairy farms in the region that it was just too small. It would take them too long to utilize it for cover crops and pasture renovations for the acreage they needed to cover. So that, helped us inform a future purchase. So we really appreciate, kind of as Jennifer and Vicki have shared, that dialogue, keeping that open with farmers on what their needs are. And so that's what brought us to purchasing the 12-foot drill, and keeping in mind sort of also like, all right, based on the fact that many of our farmers in the region are working on multiple plots of land, right? Their farms aren't all right there. So we tried to find one that was still road, able to travel over the road. So meeting those types of transportation requirements, because much of our equipment is going farm to farm, and even within a given farm, they're sometimes traveling over town lines to get there. So trying to keep things on wheel kits, trying to keep things that sort of meet travel rules of the road have been important considerations for us as well.
That's super important. And we kind of had the opposite experience, where we had the 12-footer and we did a survey of the Farmers Alliance membership, and we went with purchasing a smaller one, that there was a need for a smaller one. So yeah, and I see Jake in the chat, a survey. I think it's a perfectly appropriate use of a farmer survey, you know, kind of quick and easy too.
And I know we're going to talk about in a little while funding availability, but I think that's certainly also an influence of equipment selection too, is where the resources to make that possible. And that certainly limits or expands your options based on what you've got available. Anything else you guys want to add on selection of equipment or equipment inventory before we move on to our next topic? Or does anyone in the as participants have any questions on that?
I guess I have like so many questions. I'm not quite sure what to ask. This is Matthew Karras. I work at the Hampden, Hampshire Conservation District, and we're starting a equipment rental program. And I went up to Cheshire County and spoke with Amanda for a bit about their program. So I'm kind of taking inspiration on the idea of starting small with one piece of equipment or two at most, and then growing from there, so we don't overextend ourselves. And also we make sure we have enough money saved up for maintenance and other costs. A couple of things we're considering is like whether or not we definitely need somebody to contract with for transportation and maintenance sort of stuff. We don't have anybody readily available for that. So we were thinking about having farmers transport the equipment or picking it up. But the more research I do, one, it seems like there's no perfect piece of equipment. They all have challenges. So I'm trying to balance like lendability, cost, and the thing that seems most desirable and most lendable by some different variables is probably the no-till seed drill. And right now I'm really wrestling with, I think it's a good first piece of equipment to start off, and Amanda said it's one of the most commonly used for them. But we're trying to figure out like what swath of the farming population are we trying to target most, and we're kind of going for that like market garden scale, sort of maybe 5 to 50-ish acre, which is kind of a broad range. Just trying to figure out the best size for our community, which obviously you can't really inform, but I'm leaning towards like a 6-foot drill. But then somebody in the organization expressed like maybe we should consider the smallest one. Esh has this 5603 or whatever. It has 3 foot 6 inch spacing. And to me, it seems like maybe that's too small and wouldn't be used. There's somebody here from Berkshire Conservation District, and they have a 12-foot Esh drill. And so we're trying to get this like regional thing going where there's equipment available from different counties in Western Mass. But I guess I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on, for a smaller scale farm, are there people that would be interested in that small of a model of a no-till drill? That seems like it would take so many passes that I think it would deter some participation from that, but curious if you have any input. And if people use it, if people are primarily using the no-till drills for, sounds like in Cheshire, a lot for pastures, but if you have any vegetable farmers in your districts, are they using it for cover crops primarily? And oh yeah, lastly, just if you can just say quickly what model of a no-till drill you have, or what make you have. If I don't know if they're all Esh, or I'm looking at the Great Plains make as well.
Yeah, we have the models, the link that I put in the chat. If you can get to it, you can see exactly our models, but we have a Haybuster and we have an Etchison. Those are the models. I would say it's mostly used in corn, grain corn operations. I would, if I to give the estimate of when this is being used for planting, and then also for cover crop establishment. And I think it depends on, for us, the grant that paid for the drills has an acreage requirement in our grant. And it would be we had a lot of trouble meeting that acreage on our smaller drill, because there's no farmer who wants to take, 20 more passes in their field and take a lot more time. So that would be that's definitely driving a little bit of our decisions, is how the grant, they really want you to cover hundreds of acres or a couple hundred acres. So that's why the bigger drills for the slightly larger farms is the way we're going. and hoping to expand, into the veggie farms with the equipment that Cedar Circle has available. So not there yet.
We have a Great Plains. It's a 606 NT. The cultivation width is about 6 feet, so it's more on the smaller side. Travels over the road, right in the lines very nicely, which was a goal for this equipment. We don't have as many. We have a couple of the bigger farmers that have said it's small, but mostly our farmers are finding it to be the right size. We do have vegetable producers that use it for cover crops, and we have a lot of producers that use it for hayfield rejuvenation. So in addition to that, probably not as many in our county that are like corn planters, but so a lot of hayfield rejuvenation and some vegetable growers.
Thank you.
Great, and it looks like we have one other hand up from the Council of Soil and Water.
Hi, hello, this is Lillian Ruiz. I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Soil and Water Conservation in Connecticut. And this is so incredibly helpful to me. So thank you for hosting this. But I am so far away from this subject that, my questions are really, really like 10 feet above and not really specific. So one way I would ask you to help me is, do you have like lists of equipments per type of operation, for example, just like a fact sheet or an overview? That would be extremely helpful to me.
We had just put in the chat a link for the Cheshire equipment, and I know Jennifer had earlier put one in as well.
Okay.
Flyer, and it does have listings of all of our equipment, and has information on makes, models, rental agreement information. So if you're looking for sort of a listing of what we all are offering, that is a really good start.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from folks on equipment selection and inventory? I'm seeing in the chat about some questions here about if it's if we have to fuel, fill up for gas on some of these implements. And I'll say for most of them, the answer is no. They are all either ground driven or PTO driven from the tractors. But we do have one exception, two exceptions to that in Cheshire. We have our BCS two-wheel tractor, which does require fuel. And we do ask that producers fill it up, keep it filled at the end of their rental. We kind of consider it's just like when you rent a car. You get it at a certain level, you bring it back up to that level when you're completing your rental. Same with our soil steamer that runs on diesel, so can be filled up right at the pump. And we ask folks to do the same to fill it back up when their use is complete on the way to returning it. You guys have anything else you want to add to that question?
No, I think there was clarification on, power takeoff. It's the gear that's hooked up to your tractor. So you have to fill up your own tractor. But yeah, the drills themselves don't run on gas.
Great clarification. Thank you. It looks like we've got a couple other hands up. Ian?
Hey everyone, I just wanted to add one piece to the answer for Lillian's question about rental opportunities. So the SCC does have a statewide list for all of the districts in New Hampshire of what's out there. And so that's posted through the SCC's website, so nh.gov/SCC. It doesn't have the same level of detail as the individual districts do on prices and availability and all that, but it's at least a relatively comprehensive list of what all the districts are offering. So that's also a good resource if, especially if Lillian's interested in knowing, kind of the scope of what's out there, at least in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Lillian, you still had your hand up. Is there anything else did you have a follow-up question?
No, I was just checking the chat. No, I don't have a follow-up question. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. All right, so please keep the questions coming in the chat, but our next topic that we're going to be covering is maintenance and storage, which I know we all brought up as some of our biggest challenges. So would like to turn it over to you guys to talk about your maintenance and storage plans. What are you currently utilizing for maintenance and storage, and any sort of cautions you might share with other districts?
The the positive about having board members that are interested in the equipment is that they will usually house it for you. I would say our challenge with storage is that it always seems to be a little different. It's, every year it's, you sit at your board meeting, you're like, okay, who's taking the equipment this year in the winter? So we've, the Strafford County Board has been recently talking about kind of like a shed you can put on the county property that we may be able to like house things in one place, at the county location, rather than sort of asking our farmers every year if they can store it. So that, yeah, that's been a challenge for us, is that every year it's a little different, and we just sort of have to see who's interested this year for the winter. And the same thing with maintenance. We have people who are interested from year to year, and we, have our board members recommending, X or Y maintenance facility or garage or, tractor service provider. So we don't really have like, well, every year it goes to, Joe Repairman, which I think would be really useful and helpful. So that's kind of a piece that we would like to be more systematic and a little more structured with. But so it's been very, okay, team, what do we think we're doing this year? So having a system, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, before we joined forces with the Farmers Alliance, our drill would just go to different places each winter, and we weren't ever sure if it was covered up. Like, it was definitely sitting out all summer in the rain and all that. So having Steve stocking is really the answer. So get yourself one of those, and definitely having a place to store it. I mean, our situation's ideal where, it's being stored on a farm with a farmer who's maintaining the drill. And I think that it's probably pretty common, farmers do know about their equipment. So I think it's possible to have that relationship in a lot of places. The Farmers Alliance is a nonprofit organization. And so our conservation district actually helped them come together and form. We serve like an administrative organizational role. And so the Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance actually goes on both sides of the river up here, Vermont and New Hampshire, all throughout the watershed. And, that's a limitation of the transportation, is like, it's only within a certain service area or how far you can drive, but our equipment is available in New Hampshire and Vermont. Didn't say that before. And I'm not sure what else to say. Just the maintenance costs, it's not the same every year. There's definitely a year where it's a lot higher than the next year. Like, we had to replace all the bearings one year, some of the plates and stuff like that. So just saving for that moment in time is important.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. I'll share how we do it in Cheshire. It's a little mix of a few different ways. So in the summer, we keep all of our equipment at the county farm, parked out in the field. So it's outside and it's exposed, but it makes it easy for people to be able to hook onto it and leave as needed. We do have in the winter some storage at the county farm. They had an old garage there, and we were able to strike a deal with them to purchase new garage doors on there. So if we got them operable and in good working order, we could utilize them. And so that was sort of a something that worked out for us to be able to sort of work with the county on some infrastructure that needed some improvement, but that really helped us. But the 3 bays are not enough. And so we also do a little of that sort of working with farmers on our equipment committee and board and asking them to house the equipment in the winter, which does seem to work pretty well for the most part. When it comes to maintenance, we do work with a shop. Steve's Equipment is a equipment shop that just happens to be minutes from our office. And so we do work with them on a regular basis to do annual maintenance that is planned, as well as sort of emergency maintenance as needed throughout the season. So we encourage folks when there's a breakdown, if it's not a minor issue that the farmer can adequately address themselves, to bring it back into the shop so we know it's getting repaired in a way that we would like it to be. And so that's sort of how we handle that. But we have started with some new pieces of equipment, like with our soil steamer, a farm partnership. And so that's working out great. And I highly recommend that for others. So we have a farmer, it's quite like the situation with Steve Stocking, which I'm a little envious of. I think is awesome that you have that for all of your equipment. But we work with Piccadilly Farm down in Winchester, New Hampshire, as our partner with our soil steamer. And they have said, based on the fact that they house the equipment and help people with education and check it in and out as it goes in and out, they're able to utilize the equipment for free and get first dibs on sort of when in the season that they want to be able to use it. And that partnership seems to be working out pretty well for that farm to date. And we certainly, as we look at new pieces of equipment and even sort of revisit our old equipment, we're looking at that as a future model that could be really useful to help bring down our maintenance costs. As Jennifer said, our maintenance costs fluctuate significantly year over year. And we do keep a reserve account that's separate just for equipment maintenance. To try to save for those challenges. But for example, some years it will only be $5,000 worth of maintenance. This past year, we spent $25,000 on maintenance because of some of our aging equipment that's over a decade old and really needed an overhaul to keep it in the system. But it was still in pretty good shape. So you sort of weigh those things, right? Like, are we going to get a new piece of equipment, or are we going to invest in what we already have? And right now, with equipment costs being as high as they are, the price for us to buy a new piece was double what we paid 10 years ago. And so we thought it was well worth the investment this time around. But it is a regular challenge that we have. When we first started, we thought that we would have set the rental prices at a place that would cover maintenance and replacement costs. And we quickly realized that we are only covering maintenance costs. If we want to get replacement costs in, we're really looking at getting new grant funds to make that possible. Does anybody have any questions for the panel, or anything that they would like to share on maintenance and storage for a program like this?
I see a question about being profitable. No, it's a service. We're not making money.
100%. If anything, it's subsidized pretty heavily by some of our other grant programs. It's really mission driven.
For us, it was one of the things we tell our county when we ask for county funds every year, is that this is a service, and your county dollars helps us coordinate this program. We bought the equipment with grant dollars, but the coordination is county funds.
It's not a moneymaker, that's for certain. All right, I see a hand up, Berkshire Conservation District.
Hi, Cynthia. I'm the district administrator in Berkshire County. And I got a lot of great advice from Amanda when we were starting off our program. In 2019, we also had bought the ASH 12-foot drill. That was the year I was hired. So again, not a farmer, had to look up what the heck is a no-till drill, but since then it's become something I deal with daily. We have, under maintenance and storage, we have a kind of a farmer partnership where our caretaker has a farm, a big hay farm up in Cheshire, Mass, and the no-till is stored there. And again, he gets, we pay him for maintenance and any kind of repairs that need to be made. And he has the, he's able to use it as well and take care of it. As far as maintenance, I don't know if any of you that also have the 12-foot had to deal with replacing rims. Apparently they were defective or not strong enough on in the year that we bought it, and we were able to get replacement rims for it. Cost a lot to ship it, but we didn't have to pay for the rims. And I would add, as far as goals for the rental program with ours, as I guess it goes hand in hand with healthy soils, but also carbon sequestration is a goal that we're really trying to focus on. And realizing also that hay is not a perennial crop, or is a perennial crop, that we don't have, didn't realize that it wouldn't be rented out by farmers year after year. They really don't need it then. So we're really trying to focus now on cover crops in addition to larger, hay fields. And as Matthew mentioned, we are working on a partnership with Hamden, Hampshire, so that they're looking to buy a smaller no-till, and that hopefully we can exchange our equipment all throughout Western Mass and get it used more. We had a good year our first year, and second year it went down a little bit. Last year was a disaster with the weather, and we really lost money on it. So we're really pushing this year to get it out there and get it used. We're actually looking to hire a no-till rental program manager to work part-time to really get out there, boots on the ground, talk to farmers, and try to get more acreage under it.
Yeah, I have a thought on that as well, and maybe this is coming up in, I don't know what's coming up next, but timing and marketing. Are we going to talk about that a little bit, Amanda? Okay, I'll wait.
Definitely, yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Thank you, Cynthia, for sharing that, though. I really appreciate it. It's, I think, going to lead into some of our other conversations in a short while here. I do see one other question in the chat about how do you make sure you ask for enough grant money for repairs and maintenance of the equipment? And I can only speak from our district, but I have to say that because grant terms are so short, and most of the maintenance and repairs are coming after those grant terms are complete, we don't ask for repair and maintenance dollars in most of the grants that are available to us for equipment. We really rely on the rental fees to feed into what we are able to do for maintenance. Anything else y'all would add to that?
That's accurate.
So, I mean, some funders may let you, if you're writing it now and you say, I want to keep $5,000 for later, they may let you. Not all funders want to see $5,000 sitting after the grant period, but some may. So we could consider, well, I do want to keep a pot of this money for later, but it may or may not work for the funder.
Operation and maintenance is almost always overlooked in conservation grants, so it's not surprising. It's a challenge we're familiar with.
And that's a perfect segue into sort of our next topic of conversation. The next topic, really sort of the nitty gritty of rental fees and insurance requirements. And so I think it would be really great if you guys wouldn't mind just sort of shedding some light for folks on the insurance that you have for doing this program through your district, but also what you require of farmers to hold and share for insurance, as well as sort of how you set rental fees. And so I'll hand it over to you on that one.
Oh. Go ahead, Jennifer. I've been
Okay, yeah, so, well, I'm no insurance expert, but we do have insurance on the drill. Um, and it's a requirement of the farmers who rent the drills that they have the insurance. Most farmers of a certain size have like rental insurance already, so it's not that big of a deal, but there was kind of a big, like a little bit of a scary aha moment for us over the last year or two, where we were like, oh, we actually have to get the farmer to put the drill on, like the farmer has to report it to their insurance company when they're getting it, and then it has to be listed on their insurance. So that's a really important thing. And it's built into our, we actually got help from the Legal Food Hub. This is the Vermont Law School has a legal food hub. It's free legal services to farms and farm organizations to develop our contract. And I'd be happy to share the contract in the chat if that's helpful to people. And it has some of those terms that we require. That's one of the website also that I posted in the chat. You can see what we ask of farmers before they rent the drill. So it's a really important thing that if you don't know, you don't know. So in our experience.
Yeah, in working with our general liability carrier, they were really clear with us that when it leaves our hands, right, when it's not at the county, it's not insured. So the person renting it has to insure it, they have to have coverage for it. And like Jennifer said, most of the time they have to tell their insurance company that they're doing it. It's not enough just to have it. But it's been a real challenge for us in our counties, because we have farmers that they're homeowners and they have some hay fields, and they don't have a farm package which covers rentals. And we've spent a long time talking about it with our insurance, and they talk to their insurance, and those homeowners insurances they're just not equipped for that kind of rental. And I keep saying, well, car rental companies are able to offer insurance when, you can, the person who doesn't have it can buy insurance just for that time period, like a car rental company. But our insurance hasn't bit on that. So we were trying to convince them that we're happy to have that person pay for the time period they have it to be insured while they have it. But I haven't found a carrier that will do it. So I don't have any advice about that other than we've been finding it a real, it's a bummer that we have to tell small producers that they can't take it. A way around it is they can contract with a farmer who has the right insurance. So they can ask Joe Farmer, who has real insurance, or not, farm insurance. It's real insurance, it's just a different kind, who has farm insurance, to contract, or even be the responsible party, probably contract and actually do the work. So that's a way around it.
Yeah, that's something that is a definite challenge as well. And that's how we've sort of been our only go around with that, is that they have to have somebody else be the renter that has the adequate insurance. And so we have to have them submit a certificate of insurance that lists the conservation district as additionally insured. And we have to have that on file before the rental can move forward for each piece of equipment. And so that's a challenge for some, but absolutely necessary. When we first got started, we had private insurance, and we had both liability insurance that the equipment was covered under the district, but also an inland marine policy that the equipment we had to get for the equipment, as well as still having certificates of insurance listing as additional insured by renters. But since we've switched to a municipal insurance pool, we no longer need both of those policies. So it's just all covered through our current liability insurance, but just something to think about if you might need multiple policies if you're getting this started new in your county. All right, so that's sort of the insurance side of this topic area. How about rental fees? Anything you'd like to share with the group when they're considering sort of how do you set them and how it's working out for you?
Yeah, our fees, well, for the fees for the Farmer Alliance are lowered if you're a member of the Alliance. That's how they do it. And you can see them very clearly on the flyer that I shared, what the different fees are. We charge per acre. And there is a acreage counter, but seems to break a lot. So it's usually the farmer estimating their acreage, and it seems fine. Farmers seem to be very willing to pay at our rates, which are somewhere in like the $9 to $11 per acre. I think 8 to 11, depending on how many. The other thing we do is if it's a smaller field, I think they charge more for a smaller field. Sounds wrong, but it's true because of the transportation costs. And so we do charge a delivery fee, which I think is $50. So not a lot of complaints. We do have a lot of people signing up to be members to get the discount. So yeah, it seems to be all right. It seems to be the affordable option.
So we have a daily fee and an acre fee for some of the equipment. For the ash spreader, it's a ton fee, so how many tons they're spreading. And we've talked a lot about moving away from that daily fee. The goal of the daily fee was to encourage farmers to not to dawdle, not to hold on to the equipment while other people might need it. It's just sort of been a challenge. A lot of farmers kind of haggle with us like, oh, I only used it for 2 days, or does the weekend count? And or it rained and they couldn't use it. So like it's been sort of a source of struggle and us trying to figure out how to apply it fairly than anything else. So we've recently talked about just moving away from that daily fee and just going with an acre fee or a ton fee, depending on the equipment.
Yeah, I'll add that we do it very similarly: acre fees, daily fees, tonnage fees. It really depends on the type of equipment that we're renting out, but we've been moving towards days of use rental fees, so we don't charge them on their transportation days, because that came up all the time. Like, well, I only used it for 1 day, but I have the rental for 3, and so we just moved to, we're charging you for days of use, and out of respect for other farmers, let's get it back as quickly as possible, because so many of them want to utilize that within the same few week window for the most part. So we try to just sort of play on their sensibilities about how this is going to impact other farms as well. Any questions on insurance or rental fees from the audience?
I would just add one thing, because I mentioned, there are some things that we provide for free. So our scales and our roller crimper currently are free. I already touched on the scales. The roller crimper, I think we just want to promote it and make it available. And, it was free for them, so they want to make it free to the community. So I think that's another great option, not charging.
Well, our next topic then that we're going to move into, but do feel free to put additional questions in the chat if you think of anything relating to any of the topics we've already covered. The next topic is sort of kind of started touching on this with the rental fees, is how long do people keep the equipment? So managing a calendar and sort of juggling weather disruptions, juggling equipment breakdowns, and sort of how do you keep track of it all?
I'll jump in. This is a maybe an extra challenge in our 2 counties, because both myself and the district manager in Strafford County get contacted about the equipment. So farmers from her county tend to contact her, and farmers from my county tend to come to me. So we just have a spreadsheet, and it mostly just says like who they contact and when they're hoping to use it, which can be sort of vague for a lot of farmers, which maybe is good, but they're like, next week maybe, or which is a challenge because you're not getting like, okay, well, I need it from March 5th to March 2nd or March 10th. Like you're not getting dates. At least we aren't. And it does, we do end up, calling farmers like, hey, how's that going? Or when do you think it's going to be back? And then a few days later, oh, they're still using it. Okay, like what's your update? So then we call the other farmer to be like, well, you're next. Here's the update. So it is a lot of coordination and back and forth, and that is due sort of to the nature of farming and weather. So I don't know that it's a great system, but it's I don't know. I haven't. Maybe Amanda and Jennifer have some better ideas.
Yeah, that's very real. And again, Steve, our equipment manager, is the one handling that at this point. And it really does take that, like somebody needs to be dedicated to that relationship of communication and managing that. And but I'm thinking of it kind of from a different tilt as far as timing and calendars and planning in terms of getting the word out. That's something that I feel like has whenever our numbers fluctuate year to year, it's definitely dependent on whether we pushed ahead of time, like pushed out the message that this equipment's available. Remember, like contact us. So, for the spring planting, we really have to be getting the bug in people's ears like now, like by the end of March. And then it'll be in use through May, like April and May. And then it basically teeters off, and then it comes back up again near, cover crop planting time. So just that's where it can sneak up on you, and all of a sudden you're in, September, and you haven't promoted the drills and nobody's, reaching out. So you get the same customers, but as far as expanding the program, it's really important to plan your marketing calendar at the same time.
Yeah, I think the name of the game is communication back and forth with the farms. We do about 50 to 60 rentals a year on average for our equipment, and that takes up a lot of time. And I think that people who are getting into an equipment rental program really kind of overlook the staff commitment that you're really putting forward throughout the season. As Jennifer mentioned, like the education is a big piece of that. The outreach is a big piece of it. But just the back and forth on weather and equipment breakdowns, on how to sort of adjust calendars and fit everybody in, and moving it from farm to farm sometimes, sort of the geographic locations of everyone to be considering. We don't have it set up on a spreadsheet, but we do something really similar, Vicki, because we have a couple staff people, so we're similar situation where we have multiple people contributing to the securing it. I think that we found that using Google Calendars is a really useful way to do it for us. So every piece of equipment has its own calendar. And so then we have a shared calendars with us, and then any of the farmers who work with us on sort of maintaining it. So at any point you can look at the calendar throughout the year, see where the past rentals, when the past rentals happen, when future rentals are happening. And it allows you on the calendar to, like, in the box, write notes in there as well about like so-and-so is picking it up from them, or here's the best contact information for this person. So that's been helpful for having sort of like multiple people juggling. It's not very different from the Excel, but I found the visual representation has been helpful for me as a manager, because like I can pull it up on my phone on the Google Calendar and be like, what's happening this week, so as a reminder for checking in with people. But otherwise, I'd say it's really been covered. Like we just have to go back and forth, and for the most part, farmers are really gracious, I think, about sort of understanding weather challenges, like knowing like, all right, this last farmer had it and they need it for an extra day. And so can you push yours back? And everybody has to push theirs back a day or two. And for the most part, I think that's been worked out pretty well. There's always some bad apples, but. All right, any questions on sort of managing calendars and juggling weather? All right, I see a couple questions in the chat, what we should try to address here. Curious, so this is Matthews asked if we have any documentation that would help inform program development. So such as launching their own equipment programs, such as work plans, program manuals, training materials, etc., to share with attendees. Great question, Matthew. I know that I can just speak for our district. We've collaborated some with Jennifer and those on some training manuals, like for the Hay Buster, for example. We've got a nice video as well as a PDF guide that can be found on our websites that folks can use. It's very specific to that piece of equipment, but happy to share. We also have some for like the soil steamer and some other pieces of equipment as well. But everything we try to put right on our equipment page, so it's sort of at the fingertips of anybody who's interested in utilizing it. Pass it on to Jennifer or Vicky if you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, I don't really have like a work plan or training materials besides that. Yeah, we collaborated on the hay bus. We felt that you needed to have something like in the tractor that could show someone who didn't have someone showing them how to use it. So it's challenging, but it's worth it if you're going to be leaving the equipment and you don't have like a custom operator or someone who's really experienced who's going to show them that. So that's like, an example of that. I think that PDF, and I said in the chat how to access it, at least from our website. But then I would say the most useful thing that we have to share with you is that contract, that document that I shared a little bit higher up. That's a really good starting place, and that's pretty much what we have to share.
This isn't as much of like a district tool as much of a farmer tool, but Amanda, had you guys worked with Extension on some how-to videos? Maybe it's not quite the point of this question, but I always thought that was really useful for farmers, is to see like those videos in action, and something I wish that we had done, or we can still do. We haven't done yet.
Yeah, we've done that with our hay buster, but this year we're hoping to partner with Extension to do one on the spreader as well. Most of our equipment is pretty self-explanatory, but we find that we get a lot of calls and questions about calibration and getting things set right, and which settings do you put on for the seed drills or for the spreader. And so I think it's something that we want to do more of in the future, because we do an equipment training day each year for all of our equipment, and then one specific to our BCS. But it's it's hit or miss for people, and most folks don't always have the opportunity to be there in person. So I agree with Vicky. It is 100% worth the investment of the time, like to sort of focus on creating some of these videos or documents that can have a longer shelf life and help people when they can't be there one-on-one with somebody. It looks like there's a question for you, Jennifer, in the chat. It says, lost internet just before you're saying the most useful thing we have to share is blank.
Yes, and I reshared it. It's
okay.
It's
Perfect.
contract, and if you scroll down, there's more than just a contract in that document. So got some advice for what to do at pickup and drop off. Okay.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you.
Awesome. And I see a question from Lisa in the chat about asking me about if we think that as more districts are getting equipment, will our numbers in Cheshire County diminish? And probably, I think so, because right now our equipment has been scooting around the state and to different areas. I mean, Vicky and Elena have a great setup in the south east corner, and we are in the southwest corner of the state, and there's lots of equipment being added along in other counties. So I think our numbers will decrease some, but that's great. We love to see other districts sort of taking this on and doing it as a service. Don't see it as competition, certainly. We're just excited to see farmers being served in ways that are meaningful.
And I would agree with Amanda, that, and the benefit certainly to the farmer, that it's closer to them instead of transporting equipment. That, you know, that's a win-win for everyone if there's equipment that's closer to them that they can access.
All right, so we've got about 20 minutes remaining, and we've got 2 more questions to cover. So we're just going to jump right into those, and then we'll keep revisiting the chat as well. So the next question is an important one. Funding to purchase, grant programs and other funding sources that you found that are successful. And I realize that this is going to vary a little from state to state, but we'd love to just sort of hear a snapshot of what's worked well for you.
A lot of our equipment is loose plate grant funded. So that's our state conservation committee runs the loose plate grant program. So if you're not in New Hampshire, citizens can buy a moose plate when they register their vehicle. And that money goes to the state conservation committee for a variety of things. And then they have a pot of money set aside for these grants. So they're competitive grants. We've had a lot of success with those. We've had some funded through conservation innovation grants through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's where most of them. I think the only one I'm missing is the BCS, but Amanda will have to remind me the funding source for that one. But I think that's it for us.
Sorry, I can tack onto that. All the ones that Vicki shared are great. We've gotten some just local donors as well that show the value in this. So through the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, that has been very helpful. You Have Our Trust Fund has also been a great supporter of this type of work. I'll just add on too that some other USDA sources, the SARE grants, the partnership grant, when you work with another farmer or multiple farmers, you can have, that can help you get equipment. So can the specialty crop block grant if you're working for specialty crop producers. I think one thing to keep in mind with some of these federal sources, CIG, SARE, specialty crop, is that many of them don't like you to purchase equipment, but you can do long-term rentals of equipment that you can kick your program off with by getting some long-term rentals in place and working with a dealer to ensure that that's a situation that's going to be sort of friendly to the district and the farmers that are working with you. Jennifer, I'll pass it on to you.
Sure. So we primarily have used in Vermont the CEAP program, the Capital Equipment Assistance Program. That's been great. That's where all our no-till drills have come from, and the manure calibration, the portable scales we purchased with the Agriculture Clean Water Initiative Program grant through the state of Vermont as well. So those are the 2 grants that have helped us over here. That's really interesting to know about needing to rent the equipment and not purchase. I didn't know that.
If anybody's interested in that, happy to follow up with anybody one-on-one about sort of how that can work for a district to do long-term leases and make that work for federal grants and how it's worked for us in the past. There's some questions in the chat I want to make sure that we get to here. One of them was, what equipment have you regretted purchasing that because it has not been used very much?
Oh, we had a fence post pounder, which we don't have anymore. We sold it, and not because it did get asked for, but we just found it actually too dangerous to move around and have the farmers handle. So that one we didn't keep.
Before my time, we sold our Gitter Bridge, and I don't know why, but I think it wasn't being used. And let's see what else. Well, the Etchison actually has been a challenge for us. I think as far as not used as we'd hope. that one's been a challenge because we're trying to meet these acreage targets for that SEEP grant that I shared in the chat. Yeah, it's been difficult to get enough acres with such a small drill. And just like you said before, hay fields aren't getting planted every year. And maybe a lot of people don't necessarily have the funds to be interseeding in their hay fields, and that kind of thing. So I think it's also a marketing issue that we just haven't really tapped in yet to the folks who could use it.
I'll add on, we purchased a trailer that could be used for moving around our equipment. And after a year or so of renting that out with equipment for moving, we decided to sell it because it was becoming a liability. The loading and unloading of equipment on the trailer was a real challenge, and not everybody had the level of experience necessary to do it safely. So we decided if our equipment can't be moved on wheel kits on their own, it's not the equipment for our rental program, just because of the potential for liability with the trailers. We've also just found that the roller, our roller crimper is not used much at all. I think because the window is so short for it. The week or two in June that it's effective. We did make it free to try to expose more people as a strategy. And our no-till vegetable transplanter has barely been used as well. We've also made that free for first use to try to build interest, but I think the timing maybe was more of an issue. Kind of coincided when we got it, then COVID happened, and our outreach and education and on-farm demos really just like took a hit, with a couple of years of COVID. So that definitely affects the education and outreach, really affects sort of usage, as was mentioned earlier. Another question here in the chat is about a lime spreader. If any of us rent out a lime spreader, I can just get us started with that. We do rent out a wood ash spreader / lime spreader, and it is our second most popular piece of equipment for rental. It's widely used on a regular basis and has been for over the past decade.
We do too, and it is very popular. We also run into the challenge with that one that people want to spread manure with it. And when the grant we purchased it with was very clear that it was for lime and wood ash, and that was not to be mixed. So we get a lot of people asking for it, and they still do ask for it for lime and wood ash, but for other things too.
Another question here in the chat was, what unforeseen benefits have you been witness to through these programs? Farmers networking with each other, innovations, uptake of conservation practices, or other benefits have you seen?
For us, it's been a great way for us to connect with farmers. I feel like I've gotten to know more farmers through renting this equipment than in some of our other ways. So it's certainly been, promotion of the district and us connecting with farmers.
Yeah, I think that's the top one is, really providing a service and feeling like we're doing something tangible for the farming community. And I think, in terms of our scales, just going back to these scales, in a way, I didn't purchase them, but when I inherited them and they were brand new, like never been opened, and they're insane to transport. They're extremely heavy, and they come in this giant box, and you have to take them out and put them back in. And, and with that, it's like, going out to a farm and telling a farmer, I need you to weigh your manure spreader and then go. It's a lot of coordination because they have to be spreading at the time, because we have to weigh it full 3 times and empty once. And there's like, they kind of laugh at us, which you have to kind of take that lump. But also I really appreciate having, you have like an hour to just kind of chat. And that's always helpful and valuable, I think, is getting that time with the farmers. Maybe not to them. We get to laugh about regulations together, but then you get to kind of hear what's bothering them and that kind of stuff.
great. Thank you both. We have another question in the chat asking about what kind of equipment have you seen that would be really useful for small farmers? We've tried to look at the scale, different scales of farmers. And so we purchased our BCS, which is the 2-wheel tractor, and associated implements, which is really meant for like small market gardeners, homesteaders. You really don't want to be using a BCS if you're using if you're farming on anything over 2 acres. Otherwise, you're looking more at a tractor scale. And so we found that is something that folks thought could be useful. It's not utilized as much as we had hoped, to be honest with you, but I still have high hopes for it, and it's got a long lifespan. And we've been able to purchase all the implements that are sort of duplicates from our larger equipment to smaller equipment. So we've got a spreader for wood ash and lime. We've got seeders, roller crimper even, and many other implements that help farmers manage cover crops and soil health. So I think that could be a place to explore if you have a lot of small producers in your region. I know other districts, we've done some of this in partnership with our local public library. I know other districts also have hand tool libraries and smaller implements that aren't necessarily like big power tools that you can try sort of at the high tunnel scale or the garden scale as well.
Yeah, I'm curious about exploring that, more of the hand tools and what would be helpful for smaller farmers. And I'm also really excited about the offerings of these electric no-till veggie transplanters and other electric equipment, because it really does drastically change the air quality in the farmer's immediate environment when you're using those electric tools. So I'm excited about that for some of the smaller and especially veggie farmers.
All right, so just trying to think through all of this here in the chat, and I think there's a fun question because we're kind of getting close to the end of our time together. Is it all worth it? That's a question that Matthew has posed. They're saying there's so many elements that go into this to make it a success, and it will become a big part of a potential district staff person's job. So do you feel like the benefits outweigh? What's the return on investment?
I would say if you have the staff time, like if you're looking at your planning and you either have a staff person who can do this, or you have it, after hearing some of the back and forths and the time that it takes, if you have the staff time, yes, but it certainly it is quite the commitment of time. So the time commitment is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if it fits within what the goal of your district, like if this is what the service that your district, wants to be seen to provide, then I would say it's worth it. But yeah, it's a commitment, and it's definitely a challenge, especially in there are very busy times of the year for it. So it's be sure to block off that time for managing all this.
I agree. I think it's worth it. I've thought about that a lot over the years, and I think it comes down to local county conservation districts where we were intended to meet local needs of the land user. And if you're hearing from your land users that this is a challenge, not having access to this equipment is preventing them from good soil stewardship and management on their property, following through with BMPs, that's a concern. And I think that's what makes it worth it, is when you can fill that niche of the needs that your landowners are pointing out. And so I can't stress enough, I feel like it's not worth it when we think of, or when service providers think of like, oh, this cool new tool, we could get this and we'll bring it in as part of our program. We have been totally guilty of this. And then it's not used very much. What's really used are the tried and true things that farmers are asking for. So I think it's worth it when it's based on local need, when it's been identified by your local farming community, and you can work with them to help make the program successful. Because if farmers want it, they're going to be supportive and they're going to help you make it a success. And I think that's really key. Like we've talked a lot about having like a team to make it possible. And so yeah, that's where that's my thinking on it. It's worth it. It's 2:26. We're getting right down to the end of our time together. Really appreciate all the great questions and comments in the chat. Appreciate everybody who isn't on the panel but has an equipment rental program who's been adding comments to the chat, sharing about their experience as well. So thank you very much for that. I guess we'll just open it up to our panel and see if there's any closing words that you'd like to share.
No, I don't have anything new to add. Thank you to Amanda and to the group for all the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting to be connected to all you conservation districts, and maybe thinking about how we can make these libraries a little more visible and accessible. I saw a Vermont tool that was listing all for rent, and it was completely missing all the equipment I knew about. So having some kind of database would be probably a great thing. So I'd love to continue to collaborate with you all and get all this stuff, consolidated in one place to make it easy.
It might be a great something we could propose to our national association. Perhaps they would be able to be hosting some sort of national database. Feels like it would be a good role for them. So maybe we could reach out to them about that. I also want to just share that a while back we did start a Google group for equipment rental programs, so that way folks can share questions and concerns. And so wonder if that's something that we want to rekindle and see if there is interest from folks to join something like that. Just wondering of the folks here on the call today, if you have any interest in that, please reach out to us and see if that's something we can sort of reignite for peer-to-peer learning. But unless there's any last questions from the group, I think we're going to wrap up the official part of this. As Bené shared in the chat, we have recorded it and we will be making that available. If you think there's folks that weren't able to join today that might be interested in learning about it. And of course, we welcome communication from you all, further questions about rental programs and how we can be supportive of your districts getting something like this started. So thank you all for participating today. Really appreciate it.